Hello, this is John with Theology Ed. Let's take a look at this black militia group called the NFAC, the Not Effing Around Coalition. They were the ones that emerged in Georgia at Stone Mountain Park on the 4th of July, just right on schedule with the IPEC Goat 2 timeline and what we've seen in some of the other predictive programming. I'll review some of that a little bit in this video because not just to review, but also to help us increase and improve our understanding. But on the 4th of July, this would have been the scene you would have encountered in Georgia's park, in this Stone Mountain Park. And, you see these very well-armed soldiers. I'll call them soldiers. They're militants. They're soldiers. They're in a militia. They're not, from what I understand, even though they claim to all be ex-military at one point, there's really good reason to believe they are not all ex-military. And not even the Grand Master, their leader, is ex-military from what I understand at this point. But to me, that actually makes them more frightening because if you get a bunch of actual soldiers there, I think it's more likely that they would know how to handle their weapons responsibly, they would know how to behave responsibly, and take seriously the risks associated with violence, more seriously. Whereas a group of people who wants to look stronger, wants to look more intimidating than they actually are, is more likely to try to prove it, I think. And that concerns me. But anyways, this is this militant group, 1,000 person strong, I think it's men and women, on July 4th. And since that time, they've been growing. Their numbers have been increasing with media coverage and all of that. Now, remember, in IPEC Goat 2, we saw that they have this sort of depicted, right, where we have the black girl with a skull and bones like handler. So picture somebody in the elite as the handler, giving her a weapon, sending her out to shoot, but her lights are going to go out. You have the eclipse on it, you have the 7-5 on it as well, but her lights are going to go out. In other words, the occult elite are arming up and orchestrating an uprising among blacks in order to have them squashed, have them taken out. Okay, and that was a big part of the plan. I mentioned in a previous video that there has been a long history of plans in the United States to suspend the U.S. Constitution in the event of a uprising of or insurrection of the country, or violent protests and organized violent uprising, including by black militants, so that FEMA would take over the government and then have people hauled off to camps. And this goes back to an article that was published in the Miami Herald in 1987 on July 5th. That is exactly 33 years to the day before the buck moon this year, right? The July 4th, 5th night, the actual full moon night was full moon. The moment of the full moon was after midnight, so on July 5th. And so in this article, we saw that there was a controversial plan to suspend the Constitution in the event of a national crisis, such as a nuclear war, violent and widespread internal dissent, or national opposition to a U.S. military invasion abroad. And this included a plan for FEMA. Okay, so FEMA's clash with Smith occurred over a secret contingency plan that called for the suspension of the Constitution, turning the control of the United States over to FEMA. Notice, this is no longer your elected government. FEMA then would be in charge. Appointment of military commanders to run state and local governments. So this is a plan to take your governor and mayors and all those people, state legislators and everybody, out of positions of actual authority because of an emergency, and to hand that control over to military commanders, and declaration of martial law. So full martial law, suspension of the U.S. Constitution, no longer having representative government. Your elected officials are no longer in charge. Military commanders would be running local and state governments, and the highest power in the land would be FEMA. Okay, and that's the idea. And when would this happen? Well, in the event of nuclear war, violent and widespread internal dissent, or national opposition against a military invasion abroad was the idea, a national crisis. And the scenario outlined in this plan in the Brinkerhoff memo resembled somewhat a paper by Guifrida, I think I'm saying that right, if not, sorry, had written in 1970 at the Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, in which he advocated martial law in case of a national uprising by black militants. The paper also advocated the roundup and transfer to assembly centers or relocation camps of at least 21 million quote unquote American Negroes. Okay, so this idea of black militants rising up in an organized way, not just protesters, black militants, that gives the sense of a militarized element, right? Black militants rising up, leading to widespread internal dissent or national or violence throughout the country, would be cause for the suspension of the U.S. Constitution, handing over the power of government authority to FEMA, not your elected officials, and local and state officials would be replaced by military commanders during a period of martial law in which up to 21 million, this goes back decades now, it probably can handle more than 21 million now, where of at least 21 million American Negroes or whoever is their opposition. Now, of course, if they do this, they're not going to say, "Oh, we're going to haul them off and kill them" or anything like that. But they have the virus, right? They can say, "Oh, we're good guys. We're trying to help. Just keep order, maintain order. This is necessary to keep the peace. We're going to make sure everybody's well taken care of. Oh, but we have all these people in the camps. They're too close to one another. We really can't help it. And the virus is spreading. It's the next wave or whatever of the virus. And it's a pandemic. And what are we going to do? People are dying left and right in there." And they can look like they're clear of any actual killing. And they could get away with almost anything at that point. But the idea then is that this is something that I can't say this is exactly where it's headed. This is decades ago. But this plan has been in place, and something like this, some version of it, is certainly still with our government, right? There's some version of this that's still part of planning in general. And the fact that 33 years to the day after this, we see the Buck Moon associated with this uprising. Well, I think that we're looking at a plan here that goes from militarize the minority population that they want to target, militarize the black population, create your black militants, and then put their lights out. Okay? And that would be in this way. That would also give them the opportunity. It wouldn't just be for the black militants. Once you have martial law declared and everything in place, their real goal is what? To eliminate whatever is left of the Eon of Osiris. So resurrection, religion and culture, these sorts of things. The institutions, church, government institutions, and so on, that go back to culturally the last 2,000 years and hold to Christian values more or less, are going to be targeted as well. And so I think that's how you end up getting your Christian persecution in the U.S. probably. This is all, I can't promise anything, right? But this is not just an implausible, I'll make something up and throw it out there. We do see this as part of their planning in IPEC 2 and other predictive programming, which I'm going to review in just a second. But we know that historically, in the Miami Herald, this isn't on a conspiracy side or anything, that this type of a plan has been discussed and was a part of all this conflict with Oliver North and related to the all the scandals going on in the 80s and Rex 84 and all that. Okay, but the point is they're actually positioning themselves to do it now, it looks like. And what's happening currently with this black militia, the armed black militia group, that is getting worse. And this weekend in Louisville on Saturday, the militia went there and, well, they made violent threats now. They've moved, they're growing, and now they're making demands of the government, unreasonable demands, and then threatening violence if the demands aren't met by a deadline. So in Louisville this weekend, here you have them again. Okay, so this is Louisville on July 25th, Saturday, and Black Militia Group NFAC in Louisville to join Black Lives Matter. Okay, and what they're doing is they're protesting to get justice for Breonna Taylor. I don't know the details of the Breonna Taylor case at this point, but basically you have a case that the government hasn't been handling well. The investigation hasn't been satisfying the NFAC militia group or Black Lives Matters. And what they're doing is they are making demands. They end up making a demand that the Attorney General has 4 weeks 4 weeks to deal with the Breonna Taylor case, to complete the investigation. So can't finish Breonna Taylor investigation in 4 weeks. And here's what they had to say. In response, the militia leader told the group that he issued an ultimatum to Cameron, that is the Attorney General, telling him he had 4 weeks to finish the investigation. He also promised that the NFAC, that's the militia group, the militants, would return to Louisville. 4 weeks from today, we're going to come back here and we should have an answer, he said. He then got the group to look at their watches and repeat an oath that if in 4 weeks they didn't get the truth, the whole truth, and the mother effing truth, we are going to burn this mother effer down. Okay, so now you have a threat that they're coming back in 4 weeks if the case isn't handled to their satisfaction, which is much faster than the typical investigation, by the way. Okay, he's demanding an accelerated investigation that would satisfy their organization. So he's demanding the satisfaction, and they're coming back in 28 days. That would be on August 22nd, a week after the end of the dog days of summer there on August 15th. They're going to go back, and if they're not satisfied, they have sworn an oath that they're going to burn the place down. Okay, they're going to go violent. That's the idea. And that's concerning, right? Now, it may not go violent right away. It may go violent. It's already on Saturday, a firearm was discharged. 3 people were injured. They say it was an accidental discharge. But, I look at the situation and say, yeah, there may be a lot of incompetent people there, but even so, an accidental discharge isn't that likely. I think it's also possible that what you have is some sort of agent provocateur or somebody just trying to get things going. If a weapon is fired, somebody gets shot, and one of these militants decides to point a gun at the police or the other militia that was there to support the police. There was another militia there to support the police. Okay, and they point the gun that direction. Well, maybe they're going to get shot, or maybe they'll fire at somebody, and that gets it all going. Right? That's the sort of thing that sets it off. And that happened. 3 people were injured in this shooting. Okay, it didn't turn into anything. They just said, well, it turned out to be an accidental discharge among the NFAC members, and they sent people to the hospital and moved on with the demonstration. But we're already seeing these sorts of things. These are the types of things that create tensions, that give evidence that it's likely to get worse. Now we have, the first time, it was a militia marching 1,000 people strong. Big deal. That's a big deal. Now they're larger. They're attracting more members online. They're marching. We actually have a discharge of a weapon, and you have an opposition militia present. I mean, that's a really dangerous situation. Discharge of a weapon with an opposition militia present. Accidental discharge or real or agent provocateur or any other way. That's the sort of thing that makes everybody sit on the edge of their seats and ready to shoot. We got to defend ourselves. And so add to that violent threats and a deadline and a specific demand that to the government that if they don't satisfy a promise of violence, including an oath among the members that they're going to do it, you add all of it together, it's a recipe for a catastrophe. Okay? And that's the sort of thing that if it were to happen on August 22nd or even after that, the next time they go somewhere, because they're not going to stop, right? That they're going to go around, and at some point, things escalate and blow up, okay? And this all began on the Buck Moon Day, on the 4th of July, the day of the Buck Moon Night, okay? That's when this picked up, and now we're seeing it continue to grow and escalate gradually, just like we should have expected, I think, just like when we look at IPEC Go-To, how the rabbit is looking out over the future, not just the Buck Moon Night, but looking out over the rest of 2020. Now, with all that in mind, let's review some of the programming to see what was going on and what we can sort of expect. So remember the Candyman trailer. Of course, the Candyman film is about a guy, Candyman, who was a black man murdered in the 19th century in a cruel and brutal way by white men. His hand was cut off, and then they poured honey on him, and he was stung to death by bees, who now haunts people and murders people, kills people who dare to sort of doubt his story or to forget him and to treat what happened to him as though it was a minor issue. Okay? So Candyman is a story about forgetting the plight of a murdered black man at the hands of white murderers, and an retaliatory action, violence in response to this, to make sure that this injustice is never forgotten. That's the story. And in the trailer, of course, we have here's our annular eclipse symbol with the black sun in the middle, but then you have a buck in it. And of course, the buck representing the buck moon, which comes after the annular eclipse. There's your June 21st through July 5th symbolism. And Candyman in the trailer says, I'm the writing on the wall. And we go in and we look at this wall scene here. And there's the bright ring and the dark center. There's your annular eclipse. We go over. There's, of course, Candyman, his mouth open. And here's a buck rabbit. Right? There he is. Ears, head, all that. Here's your rabbit. Looking at what? And a bomb with the number 4 on it, which is ignited and about to blow. And that's related to the 4th of July, which comes before the buck moon. But now what's interesting about this, look closely at what we're really seeing. We have the annular eclipse, June 21st. Buck moon, July 4th, 5th. But then we have the 4th and July 4th after it. Certainly this is a way of representing July 4th, even though it's also just for fun, the way graffiti is used. So here we have this explosive. But notice what happened. Why is the 4th after the buck on the 5th? It looks to me like this explosive, the fuse was lit on the 4th, but then the buck is going to watch it after when it finally blows. Okay, so what we have is, this is very similar to what we have in I Pet Goat 2, where we have the buck, it comes, the shot is taking the buck but misses him, and then the buck is looking over this direction in the second half of 2020, and that's where all the problems arise. That's where you get holes in the heads, black eyes, heads crushed together, people unconscious. All of that's going on over here in 2020. And outside, we have the buck cloud looking down, and the buck moon with the big ears looking down over the doomsday clock with the United States flag torn in half. And we see this catastrophe. The buck is looking out over it in the second half of 2020. So what we're seeing then is the same thing. Look, the buck is looking, the buck is looking, the buck is looking, and here the buck is looking. But what is he looking at? He's looking at an explosive that has a fuse that was lit on the 4th, but now is after the buck moon when it will finally blow. And I think that's what we see here. There's the fuse being lit. This organization is probably going to be instrumental in bringing the chaos that's going to happen later this year. Could be. I can't promise anything. But, okay, that's the fuse being lit. But the bomb hasn't gone off. Now we're getting closer to the bomb going off with this threat. Okay, this threat on July 25th, just a couple days ago, which is going to be followed up in 28 days, apparently, in 4 weeks, by them going back to Louisville to see if their demands have been met, and if not, violence. Which all certainly is going, whenever they go back, it may not be right on that day, but whenever they do go back, it'll probably be on that day. Whenever they go back, certainly the opposition militia will come back and be even stronger, because now they know there's a real threat of violence. This is the kind of thing that can really blow up. And that happens on August 22nd, which is 7 days after the end of the dog days of summer, which we've talked about over and over again. And we may not see it all happen on that day. It can be later than that. This predictive programming isn't just in the Candyman trailer and in I Pet Goat 2. We saw in Us as well, right? In Us, the people in the underground who've been oppressed and mistreated, abused, suffering for long periods of time, they finally come out in an organized way to fight against the people above ground, to be freed from the oppression, to be untethered. And they're asked, Gabe asks them, what are you people? And they said, what are we? And she leans in and she says, we're Americans. This is the uprising of the Americans, okay? The oppressed Americans, the underground Americans. And who are the underground Americans in the video? When they're killing one lady, the song playing is F the police, coming straight from the underground. A young minority got it bad because I'm brown and not the other colors, so police think they have the authority to kill a minority. F that crap. Beat a police out of shape, and when I'm finished, bring the yellow tape to tape off the scene of the slaughter. Punk police are afraid of me, a young minority on the warpath, and when I'm finished, it's gonna be a bloodbath. That's the song that they're playing in Us when these Americans who come from the underground, straight from the underground, come up and start to kill off the people above ground in an organized way in Us, right? In the film Us, Jordan Peele's film. It's organized. Not only when there's news coverage, they have video footage of the people from the underground starting to do their hands across America and all that, and there's killing going on. And they say in the news coverage, well, okay, this seems to be a group of individuals engaged in some sort of demonstration or protest. And it says before, Gabe talked about what he was hearing on the news, he says, and they look like us. What does that mean? Well, in the film, of course, they look like twins. But the point is, they look like us. They're not Asians. It's not Chinese invaders. This isn't people from around the world. This is our own fellow countrymen, right? These are people who are from the United States. This is an American uprising again. And they're engaged in a demonstration or protest, but not just some sort of crazy, disorganized one. He says before, they say, well, what are they doing, Jason said. And Gabe says, I don't know, but that would take a crap load of coordination. And when they discuss it as well in a different scene, Gabe's wife says that it's certainly they've been preparing for this for a long time, and we're at a disadvantage because this has been planned. And so this is an organized uprising, and that's why this whole militant uprising element is a huge part of this plan, I believe, at this point. Okay? Again, I'm not going to promise anything, but it sure does look like, and we're getting to the point to where I don't have to promise anything because it's already happening. Right? I don't have to promise or not promise anything. We're just watching it unfold. It's right there before our eyes, right on schedule, right with the buck moon. Just like we were saying, that it's something that you may not detect right away, but it's coming, and it starts then, and it's going to unfold in the months following. And we're watching it unfold, and we're seeing that it lines up with all the predictive programming. It's a frightening picture. The worst case scenario being this whole FEMA takeover, martial law, people being hauled off to camps and killed, and then being told that a virus is killing people in the camps. We're trying the best we can to make sure it's a safe environment, right? And everybody says, oh, and they keep on living their lives while a slaughter is happening. Now, in the same thing, this is all related, what we just talked about. The plan in Louisville is to go back after the dog days of summer over, and that's when maybe the violence will start, okay? But this takes us to this scene in Us. Notice that in this scene, we have this underground boy, okay? This is Pluto, that's his name. He's one of the tethered who comes out from the underground and is a part of the uprising and the violent response to, the violent acts to untether, to remove the people from above ground from places of power and privilege and all that. And he's there, and out comes Jason, who's wearing his werewolf mask. He gets out of the car, or the SUV, and he passes in front of the sun. He eclipses it. So there's your solar eclipse. And then where does he go? Here's your sun. At the same position of Sirius, you have your werewolf, the wolf, the dog type of dog, okay? Wolf. And we have the dog star represented. Here's your conjunction of the sun with Sirius. That's your dog days of summer. And he's going to stay in this conjunction for a period of time. See? He stays there. He stays there. He keeps going all the way back. He's still there in the conjunction. Okay? Now he's going to keep going back, and he starts walking back to make Pluto walk back as well. Now Pluto, the name, obviously, the planet, or what do they call it now? It's not a planet. I don't know. Whatever. It's a planet, or some other name like a planet. Anyways, Pluto is retrograde. So Pluto, if you look closely, Pluto starts walking backwards. That's Pluto retrograde in when? The dog days of summer. And Pluto keeps going back retrograde until he walks straight into the fire, and the rioters, the protesters, or the militants, or whatever they are, okay, these demonstrators, are going to be burned up. That's when he catches fire. Now, when is that? So let's look at this. So the dog days are happening, and we don't have anybody getting burned up during that yet. They're going to go back, and he ends up on fire. Now, this is actually currently going on. On April 25th, Pluto stations retrograde and will continue retrograde until October 4th. So astrology.com, the website here, sometimes is using times that are day early for Americans. So it might be in the U.S. April 26th to October 5th. It doesn't matter. Same timeline. But Pluto is retrograde when? During the entire time of the dog days, when Sirius is in a conjunction with the sun between July 3rd and August 15th, it turns out, this year. Okay? And so he's going to walk back. This is Pluto retrograde. And at the end of that, you have the fire. Now, that could be any time after the dog days are over until maybe early October, when things really keep going or escalating. I'm not sure. I'm not going to promise that. But the point is, he walks into the fire, retrograding into the fire. So even after the dog days are over, he's retrograding, and it's retrograde. And at some point, you have the fire. The rioters finally get burned up. Now, I don't know if that means that we have only till October for the protests to really get out of hand, or these conflicts to really grow worse until they're finally, taken down. I'm not sure, but you can see what's going on here and the importance of that. We have the dog days, Pluto retrograde, into the fire, or in other words, dog days, and finally the uprising burned. Or the uprising catches fire and really takes off. Maybe that's metaphor if it was going on there. I'm not sure, symbolic of what's going on. So maybe it goes slowly until October, and then October it heats up, so to speak. I'm not sure, but we're going to watch, and we can see that what's going on is related to this. And so what we have is going on is the plan. The buck moon wasn't a miss. The buck moon, what I mean by it wasn't a miss, we didn't misinterpret I Pet Goat 2 and these various predictive programming, these various trailers and movies and so on. We didn't get it wrong. I don't know how it's all going to play out in details here, but it's happening. And what went on this last Saturday in Louisville is a big deal. And I'll be honest, I hope it doesn't get bad, because that could be really ugly. In the worst case scenario, you'll have FEMA controlling your country people under martial law, and you'll have local government, state government replaced by military commanders, and people hauled off to camps while they have a cover story for people disappearing in the camps with the virus. So that's a very unsettling and terrible worst case scenario. Usually they don't do things that obvious that are so obvious, where just declare martial law and haul people off. They're more likely to just have a gradual rollout of martial law. Like in Portland, they're already, let me see, do I have a story on that? Yeah, in Portland, protesters counter tear gas with leaf blowers in standoff with federal troops. Trump's dangerous attempt to create a federal police. See, what's happening is they're rolling out it's like the whole FEMA plan isn't absolutely necessary. Maybe what they'll do instead to make it look less shocking is to roll out a federal police, roll out martial law and federal government, federal control of the situation in a way, city by city, where people are, they just take it and don't think much about it, right? That's, given how they usually operate, that's probably more likely than just straight up having FEMA come out and say, we're in control and here's martial law and all of that. But it's not impossible. And we know the plan is there. And if they replace that plan with something else, it's just going to be to accomplish the same thing in a more subtle way that makes it harder for you to recognize, because that's how they do things. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to make sure we talked about that. A commenter brought up what went on with Louisville on July 25th here, just a couple days ago, 3 days ago, 3 days ago. And I thought, man, and he said, you should really make a video about it. I agreed. I think it's worth making a video about this, and I hope that that you find some value in it. So like, subscribe, share, and all that. Take care. Blessings.